Hey guys, so this video is a response to a video that Epydemic made about the problem of evil. And if you don't know, the problem of evil basically argues that the existence of an all-loving, all-powerful and all-knowing God is incompatible with the existence of evil and suffering in the world. And because we see evil and suffering in the world, therefore an all-loving, all-knowing, all-powerful God cannot exist. So the problem of evil has two versions. The logical problem of evil basically says that the existence of evil is logically incompatible with God, and the evidential problem of evil says that it's just really unlikely that evil and God would both exist. And Epydemic responds to both versions. Okay, so let's get into it. Epydemic's response to the logical problem of evil is the classic free will defense. His formulation of the free will defense goes like this. 1. Free will is a moral value. 2. God cannot force free will. 3. God is justified in creating a world with free will. 4. Free will allows for the existence of evil. So Epydemic is arguing that the existence of free will seems to necessitate at least the possibility of evil. But the thing is, in this kind of situation, possibility isn't really an issue. God knows what I'm going to do before he creates me. He knows everything I'm going to do, every event in my life, every action I choose to do, whether good or evil. And it's the same for everyone else. He knows what everyone else is going to do, because he's all-knowing. So why does God choose to create a being that will do evil acts? God could just only create beings that will use their free will to choose to do good every time. That doesn't seem logically impossible. Do you really think there is no possible world where every being has free will, and every being also uses that free will to do good and not evil? I know you don't believe this because you believe in heaven, and you later say, later in your video, that in heaven we only get pleasure. So I assume that in heaven I can't punch someone in the face, or I can't do evil acts. So why does God not just make us in heaven first, and forget this whole earth place? If you want a syllogistic argument for this, then here it goes. Premise 1. God is defined as an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving being that created the universe. Premise 2. There's at least one logically possible universe, which we'll call Universe X, where every being that exists has free will, and yet none of these beings choose to do evil. Premise 3. If God exists, he would create Universe X. Premise 4. Evil exists. Conclusion 1. Therefore, God did not create our universe. Conclusion 2. Therefore, God does not exist. Okay, so that's all I have to say on the logical problem of evil. In the second half of Epydemic's video, he talks about the evidential problem of evil, and he basically gives reasons why God would allow evil. And I'm just going to look at all those and tell you why I don't think that they make sense. 1. God's purpose for humanity is not to provide them with an easy, convenient lifestyle. Eliminating suffering is not his purpose. Humanity's purpose in life is not happiness, but a knowledge of God and a relationship with God. The Bible tells us that because Adam and Eve disobeyed, they would suffer and life would not be convenient. Now, if they rebelled and God did not introduce suffering into the world, he would have been positively reinforcing their rebellion. If this was the case, humans may have avoided suffering, but rebellion from God would be encouraged. Okay, so I have a few problems with that. Firstly, I don't see why an all-loving God's purpose that he gives to humanity would be anything but their well-being and happiness. Like, if I'm a loving parent, right, I want my children to be happy. And their happiness is more important to me than them having a relationship with me, isn't, like, that's kind of selfish. If I'm, like, say, from the third world, and I know that the only way my children will have a good life is if I give them away to some first world family that comes to my village, that'd be an incredibly loving thing to do, because even though I might be less happy because I won't have my children and they will never have a relationship with me, it means that they will have a better life. That seems to me like a loving thing to do. Secondly, Epydemic tries to justify God kicking Adam and Eve out of the garden by saying that if he didn't, it would just reinforce their rebellion. But when God told them, hey, don't eat from that tree, even before he told them to, he knew with 100% certainty that they would eat from the tree. What kind of loving being would command someone to do something with 100% certainty that that person wouldn't do that thing, and then punish them for not doing it? Couldn't he have just let them eat from the tree? The whole knowledge of good and evil seems to be the exact kind of thing that you're arguing that God would give to his creation. And if Adam and Eve hadn't have eaten from the tree and didn't know what was good or bad, how would they even know that disobeying God was a bad thing? 2. Although God's main goal is not for humanity to have a convenient lifestyle, in a way, an all-loving creator would want the greatest happiness for his creations. In fact, this is likely why he allows free will, because love is best if freely chosen. However, if God was truly loving and all-knowing, he would know that the greatest happiness can only be achieved through knowledge and a relationship with him. In the end, human benefit is maximized. Okay, I'm not really sure what he was trying to say here. It seems to kind of just be a repeat of his free will defense. However, if God was truly all-knowing, he would know that the greatest happiness can only be achieved through knowledge and a relationship with him. Okay, so if that's true, I don't really see why he would restrict knowledge of his existence into something like a book or the Bible, you know. I come from Australia, right, and for thousands of years there were these indigenous Aboriginal people who had no knowledge of God. Like, why is that? Are they all going to hell because no one told them about Jesus? That seems very unloving to me, when he could have just been, hey guys, I exist, let's have a relationship. God could make his existence as obvious as 2 + 2 = 4 if he chose to, but he didn't. And yes, I know you addressed this in your problem of hiddenness video. I will respond to that soon, so stay tuned. 3. Suffering keeps people humble, and often points out their need for God. The idea here is that suffering and finding God is a far superior position to never suffering and also finding God. In fact, if suffering leads to knowledge and a relationship with God, then it leads to the greatest form of happiness. On the other hand, if lack of suffering deprives one of knowledge of and a relationship with God, it limits one of the greatest forms of happiness. Okay, so you're saying here that suffering actually is a good thing because it makes people have a relationship with God. I kind of get where it's coming from because, you know, you hear so many stories about people's, you know, family dying and then suddenly they become religious, like that kind of conversion or, you know, a newborn againness after a tragedy. So I understand where it's coming from. But an all-powerful God, not just an all-loving God, but an all-loving and all-powerful God, could give knowledge that he exists and form a relationship with his creation without the existence of evil. It's like, you know, you hear stories about someone gets hit by a car, right? And then in the hospital for that, when they're like getting treated, they get an x-ray or something and they find out that they have cancer. And then people point to them and say, see, God, you know, we thought it was a bad thing, you getting hit by a car. But it's actually a good thing, because God revealed to you that you have cancer and now you're going to survive. But couldn't God have, like, written you an email or something? If God's all-powerful, he could have figured out a way to let you know that you have cancer without the unnecessary suffering of you getting hit by a car. 4. Without suffering, one cannot appreciate pleasure on the same level. If everything were filled with pleasure, then pleasure would become devalued. The contrast of suffering and pleasure gives pleasure a greater meaning. To address this objection before it comes, we will have experienced suffering on earth, but escape it in heaven. In heaven we will experience only pleasure, but will be able to truly appreciate having knowledge of suffering from our time on earth. Okay, so my problem with this is I think it's very possible to appreciate how fortunate you are for not experiencing a bad event without having experienced that event. If a person has never been raped, they can still appreciate how awesome it is that they haven't been raped and still empathize with people who have been raped. I don't need to have had cancer myself early in my life to appreciate how awesome it is not having cancer is right now. And couldn't have God given me the knowledge of what it's like to have cancer without me actually having cancer? Like, couldn't God have, like, implanted memories in me or something like that? It seems an all-powerful God would be able to make its creation appreciate pleasure without causing this much suffering. Okay, and also the part about we experience suffering but then we get into heaven and that makes it okay. Now this seems to depend on whether or not people who haven't put their faith in Jesus can go to heaven or not. I've talked to both Christians who believe that, say, babies who die go to heaven and Christians who believe babies don't go to heaven. So I'm not sure what side Epydemic is on. To me, from what I know of Christianity, it seems more in line, it seems more biblically correct that people who haven't put their faith in Jesus don't go to hell, so dead babies and people who have never heard the name Jesus on islands and stuff go to hell. Just because, like, Jesus says the only way through heaven is through me and that kind of stuff. So from that perspective, it's excellent for you, Epydemic, because yeah, you suffer for a bit and then, you know, you go to heaven. It's all good. But what about, like, as I said, the Aboriginal people who populated Australia before we came along? Because God didn't choose to communicate with these people the method of salvation that you were fortunate enough to be taught as a young child. These people, when they die, experience an eternity of horribleness, of pain and suffering. Not only does that seem really unfair, but it doesn't seem like something an all-loving being would do. Hey guys, I'm just editing the video and it's too long, so I'm gonna have to split it into 2 parts. So go check out the second half, here. Okay, cool. Have a good day, guys.